When they don't want you to ask questions, if they don't want you to find out whether the Bank of England has all of Australia's 80 tons of gold sitting in their vaults, they will run out the clock and basically come up with all sorts of reasons for why they don't want you to, they don't want to give out information, or they want to don't release audit reports, etc. And there is a lot to this about governments, central banks, bullion banks, mainstream media, military, intelligence services. There is much more to this aspect than just looking at a spot price on a Kitco chart or a gold.org chart and thinking, what is the price of gold today? There's a whole monetary system, there's a whole international framework, there's a whole series of vested interests across the world that's involved in this.
This is Dunnigan Kaiser, founder of Liberty and Finance. I'm now a licensed gold and silver dealer with Miles Franklin. Call me directly for the physical gold and silver that you need at the best price with personalized, private service from one of the oldest and best respected companies in the business. 30 years strong, A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, 0 complaints, licensed and bonded, insured delivery or vault storage or IRAs, excellent prices, privacy and confidentiality, pay by check, money order, ACH or wire, satisfaction guaranteed. Call me directly at 419-819-9209 or my associate at 310-562-6400 or email us at kaiser@milesfranklin.com. Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. We have a returning guest you're sure to recognize. This is John Adams. He's an economist from Australia. He joins us this Friday, April 9th, 2021. John, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Thank you, Dunnigan, for having me.
We've had you on many times, always talking about the truth, always talking about what people need to know so that they can take care of themselves and retain their freedom. We've talked about cash bans. We've talked about all kinds of different scandals that they aren't being informed of, and you've broken those here on our channel for us so that people can be aware. Most recently, we've spoken with you several times in the past few weeks about a growing scandal around the lack of physical silver on both metals exchanges as well as in some major depository and reserve programs and ETFs. And we'd like to touch base with you on what are the latest developments, because you've been tweeting several times per day about additional awarenesses that we're gaining, new stories, testimonies, and pieces of data and information that are coming out about the truth about the scarcity of physical silver and perhaps scandalous, unethical ways of handling the information around this metal that are leaving people in the dark and leaving them without owning what they think they own. So one of the things that's been confusing to people, and I've had a client ask me just about this today, and I thought we could just take a few minutes to get it defined right up front here, is what is the difference between these, from the most obvious way of holding physical metal in your hand that you own directly and you hold directly as the most positive and obvious thing of, I own this because it's in my hand. What are the levels that take us farther away from that? Can people understand? And you've talked to us about the next step away from that is having it not in your hand, but you've paid someone else to guard it for you, and that's in a segregated and allocated, but it still belongs to you. So if you could talk to us about it, and then I think there's beyond that would be pooled, and then beyond that would be in an ETF, and then beyond that is in unallocated. In all of those various forms, people often think they own silver. So clearly they do own it if it's in their hand and they have possession of it because they purchased it. What is the definition, at least in Australia, of the next step of this allocated and segregated? They've got someone else taking care of it and guarding it for them, but it belongs directly to them?
Sure. Yeah. I'm thinking, look, Dunnigan, you've asked some very important questions, and there's a lot of investors around the world in both gold and silver who don't understand these key definitions. So to break it down very simply, if you go to a dealership and you buy, for example, a kilo of silver, and you walk out the door and that kilo of silver is in your hands, that is your legal property. That is what I call physical direct ownership. Now, if you don't want to physically hold it because of safety reasons, security reasons, things like that, someone else can hold your legal property. And in the Australian context, for example, there are, non-bank, non-government vaulting services here in Sydney that just vaults all sorts of things from legal documents to jewelry to artwork to bullion, etc. So you can get an independent vault to hold it, or typically bullion dealerships, they also provide a vaulting service. And the company I work for is Good as Gold Australia in South Australia. We have a vaulting service as well. So in the context of the firm I work for, when a client says, I want you to vault it for me, it is still their legal property. But we are holding it for them. So they pay us storage fees. We give them an inventory statement that says that, a record of their legal property. And basically, at any point in which they wish to retrieve their legal property, we are obviously obligated to assist that client in a very short time frame.
And what do you call that type of ownership?
So we call that in Australia allocated.
Allocated. Any difference between allocated and segregated, or are those one and the same?
So in the Australian context, that is one and the same. So if it is allocated, it is by definition segregated, because the segregation means it's your legal property.
Okay. And when they would retrieve, if they ask you to return to them their property, you're going to give them back the exact same physical bar of metal, or the same thing that they stored with you, the same serial number, for example.
Well, yes. So a very important question, Dunnigan. So in the case of the firm I work for, it is absolutely the bar they bought is the bar they'll get back. There are other dealerships in Australia, and there's a bit of controversy around this element, whereas in some cases they will give you the precise bar back. In other cases, they'll give you the same product back, but a different serial number. Now, there are some questions about that I think are going to emerge over the next few weeks. And I think by the end of April, early May, we'll have some breaking news on that particular question. But again, so the inventory statement says this is a record of your legal property. And obviously for some dealerships, the legal property is not a specific a bar. It is a bar of a particular brand, a particular weight, a particular purity, and they may just produce that bar that's on your inventory statement, but it may not be the precise bar that you bought on the day of purchase.
So you say there's some controversy around whether that still qualifies for the legal definition of allocated, and that's going to be tested in the next few weeks through some investigations that you're going on with?
Yeah.
Okay. And now the next step beyond that, I understand, is pooled. What's the difference between what we've described so far and pooled ownership?
Okay. So in the context of the Perth Mint, but also there's another firm called ABC Bullion, they have a product called pool allocated. Now, pool allocated is you do not legally own any silver. So in the case of the Perth Mint, their promise to the market is that they have a warehouse full of 1,000 ounce good delivery bars, so LBMA approved, and you buy a share of that pool. So, for example, if there's, if people have poured money in that is worth 1,000 ounce bars, well, they are required to have a warehouse full of 1,000 ounce bars, 100,000 ounce bars that will back the funds in the pool. So you enjoy the price movement. You can get a cash redemption if you wish. If you would like to convert your silver or your interest in the pool into physical silver, there's a process for that to happen. And obviously the controversy with the Perth Mint is on pool allocated is when people have stood for delivery, they have not been able to get the silver within the requisite time frame. Now, I should say, just to be clear on this, the Perth Mint over the last couple of weeks have made this key point that the issue is that not that they don't have the silver, it's they don't have the silver in the right form. So some people may have, for example, 100 ounces of pool allocated, but the bars are 1,000 ounces. So they don't have the manufacturing fabrication capacity to convert the 1,000 ounce bar to a 100 ounce bar. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem with that explanation is even as late as yesterday, so it's Thursday your time, Friday here in Sydney. Thursday yesterday in Australia, I had a phone call from a client of the Perth Mint who had 10,000 ounces in pool allocated. 3 weeks ago, he said, if you have these 1,000 ounce bars in a warehouse, I want to stand for delivery for 1,000 ounce bar. I don't want something smaller. Just give me what you have, which you say you have. And the answer was, we can't give it to you. And why? Something to do with the Perth Mint accounting system. A completely ridiculous explanation, and it has absolutely no credibility about it. So that is the difference about pool allocated. They're supposed to be manufactured, fabricated bars sitting in a warehouse. Again, you don't legally own the bar, but you have an interest in this pool, and you can either get a cash redemption based on the market price, or you can get or you can convert your interest in the pool to physical, or to a physical allocated bar of whatever denomination it is. And then once you go from pool allocated to allocated, you've moved from a promissory note to physical direct legal ownership.
All right. And then the next step, ETF membership or ownership, like SLV or other ETFs, where how is that different from what you just described under ownership in a pool?
Sure. Okay. So the ETF is now, again, you don't legally own any silver, so you don't own any direct silver bar or silver coin. Mm-hmm. So an ETF is a legal structure. So it's basically a trust, and the trust will issue units. And there's a legal document of the trust called a prospectus, and the prospectus basically outlines how the trust will work, and generally there is some sort of formula that the prospectus will offer to say that for every dollar that comes into the trust, we will issue so many shares, and at the same time we issue shares, we will put silver or gold into a vault managed by a custodian according to a particular formula, and that is how an ETF works. And obviously, the controversy with SLV is in early February, without sort of announcing to the market, but Ronan Manley from Bullion Star found it. They changed their prospectus to basically insert language that said that the initial commitment to their investors about this relationship between the number of shares on issue and the silver that's going to be in the vault. Because they couldn't get the silver, they changed the formula, and that is effectively I say that's a default because they changed their commitment to the market because they just couldn't get the requisite silver. So that's the key difference. So you do not legally own any silver, but you own a share of a legal structure called a trust.
And then the next step is unallocated. How does that differ from anything we've talked about so far?
Sure. So in the case of the Perth Mint, so what we said before, pool allocated is a warehouse full of already fabricated bars, and it's supposed to be 100% backed 1-for-1. Unallocated is, rather than having any fabricated bars, there's a working stockpile of raw silver that the Perth Mint has in its production, and you own an interest in that raw silver. So again, as the price goes up and down, you can enjoy the price exposure. If you wish to go from unallocated to allocated, so if you say, I want you to take this, I may have 100 ounces in raw silver. I want you to convert that into a 100-ounce silver bar, and I want to legally own that bar. So, and then obviously they have a commitment to actually doing that, and then you have to pay a fabrication costs because it costs the mint money to go from a form of raw silver to an actual physical bar that's going to be your legal property. So they're the key differences there. So again, unallocated, you do not own legally anything other than a promissory note, and what it is it's just supposedly again a pile of raw silver that is the legal property of the Perth Mint, and that they're using as part of their general production.
It's bewildering to most ordinary people who just think, well, do I own silver or don't I? And I think that these distinctions that you've made will help to clarify in people's mind, I think. Okay, so let's take it forward. What are some of the key takeaways? You've had successive revelations, your investigations, you've been calling out to the analysts in the industry, big name people, all of the major independent media platform hosts and so on, asking them to please put the word out and get testimonials find out facts, make phone calls, inquire. What are some of the key revelations that have come to light in the past couple of weeks of this investigation that you've been coordinating?
Sure. So I'd make a couple of points. The first one is, on another channel, I just did a roundtable discussion a couple of days ago with Craig Hemke, and the title of the show is, a new silver revolution is now sweeping the world. Now, it's a revolution. So we are seeing a revolution in the silver market, and the reason why, Dunnigan, is because when a retail investor realizes they own nothing, and they want to legally own some silver, and they make the switch from unallocated or pool allocated or an ETF to either physical direct ownership that they will take away and store it somewhere themselves, or if they go to allocated and they have a counterparty storing it for them, they will never go back to synthetic. They will never go back to a synthetic product. And so we have seen in the last 2.5, 3 weeks here in Australia, the biggest stampede in Australian history in the silver market from synthetic to physical. So I have had all sorts of customers before Easter. We're talking 10, 11, 12 tons that I can record by multiple clients who have switched from these synthetic products to physical. And then obviously you put out, you sent me a message and we shared on Twitter about one of your viewers who went from SLV to PSLV. And we can talk quickly about PSLV before we wrap up the conversation. Please. But PSLV is more trusted as that they have the physical silver as opposed to SLV. There are significant questions as to how much silver that they actually have. But also in the private sector in Australia that offer these synthetic products, I have connections across the industry, and they have said that their own clients have come en masse to stand for physical delivery, and they're getting out of these synthetic products. And so since then, as I've done these, so 2 weeks ago, I was on your show. I was on a whole host of other shows as well in the alternative media space. And I'm getting now emails out of the United States, Canada, UK, Germany, Argentina. People around the world are waking up to this situation with synthetic gold and silver. They're making the switch, and what we're seeing is a structural, permanent change to the silver market, and that hasn't abated this week. For example, I just had someone call me in the last 24 hours who has 50,000 ounces between unallocated and pool allocated at the Perth Mint. He wants to go to physical. So again, the more physical that gets drained out of the system, that's going to exacerbate shortages right across the network. And that's going to obviously apply more pressure at COMEX. And one of the important things I will say is, and I want to credit Craig Hemke for writing this, on the 2nd of February, he wrote an article for Sprott Money, and he said that the silver squeeze will not, so the first crisis flashpoint in the silver squeeze will not be in New York, and it will not be in London. It will be Perth, Montreal, or Zurich with these unallocated accounts. And lo and behold, a month and a half later, it's Perth. And so Craig Hemke, he's one of the best experts in this area, and he was able to see before anyone else. And obviously, what he precisely said has come to be. And I think people around the world are now waking up to this fractional reserve nature of what's going on, and that is obviously driving investment behavior. The other key point I'll say, Dunnigan, is that the public relations campaign of the Perth Mint has been an absolute catastrophe over the last 3 weeks. Richard Hayes, the CEO of the Perth Mint, has attempted to restore confidence among Australian customers by using the mainstream media, all propaganda pieces, no tough questions, no investigative journalism by the Australian press to date, and that has not inspired confidence. Every time he speaks, he's actually making people question him in the Perth Mint even more. The other thing I will say is I think the Perth Mint has completely misjudged its customer base. The Australian press in general don't speak about gold and silver on a regular basis. Australian customers who want information about the market, they go to the alternative media. So they come to your channel. They'll go to, for example, Mike Maloney is very popular. Chris Marcus, Arcadia Economics, Palisade Gold Radio, that is also a very popular channel. And these are the channels that are driving the Australian market. So if Richard Hayes wanted to actually calm the Australian market down, he should have actually called you up and said, Dunnigan, give me half an hour. You can ask any question I want. I'm going to give it to you straight, and we're going to actually talk to Australian investors directly. And so by the fact that he tried to go through the mainstream media route, he, again, completely misjudged the market. And he's actually helped exacerbate this situation in Australia by the way he's been speaking on the record. He speaks like a banker, and he has a banking background as opposed to speaking like, for example, Andy Sheckman. He talks like a bullion dealer. He talks very highly of his customers. I mean, obviously, you've spoken to people in the mining sector who also are very positive about gold and silver, and yet he had a number of disparaging comments about Wall Street Silver and Reddit, calling them keyboard warriors, and that again is a red flag to people in the alternative media space who are looking for truth and justice and honesty rather than spin and propaganda.
All right, so what specific learnings or findings have come to light that we didn't know when we had you here about 2 weeks ago on this very topic that you think are the most significant for our audience to be aware?
Sure. Okay. So the biggest scandal this week is this issue of Chinese bars. So Tuesday, in Australia, the Monday after Easter, it's a public holiday. It's called Easter Monday. So I get a message on Tuesday morning. There was a client of the Perth Mint who had 17,000 ounces in pool allocated and said he wanted to go to allocated. He called the Perth Mint up in the morning and they said, we have two 1,000 ounce Perth Mint bars, but we have 15 bars from China, from an LBMA accredited refiner. If you're willing to accept those bars, well, we can do the deal. And that investor was happy to do that situation. Now, I did put out a tweet about it and created a firestorm a few days ago. Before I did call, for example, David Morgan. I did talk to a few other people in the industry. A few comments to make. The first off is that in 2020, as there were shortages last year, the LBMA increased their list of approved refiners, which included refiners from China, Kazakhstan, Russia, Turkey, etc. So people have been suspicious about the accreditations from last year as to whether they were genuinely approved or whether they were just added to the list because they were desperate in terms of getting enough silver accepted by the LBMA and the COMEX. So that's point one. Point two is that, the people who I've spoken to date in Australia who have had experience with these Chinese 1,000 ounce bars, so far there has been no problem with them. So, I've been told that these are, they meet industry standards. They are LBMA approved. And even though there have been some concerns about China's behavior in the past, no evidence to date has it revealed that there are any problems with the bars. But what I will say is that there has been a lack of transparency to the public and to Perth Mint customers about what they were getting. So in this situation, this investor was told, if you want these foreign bars, you pay for them and you get them. Now, when I put out a tweet, someone from Melbourne saw my tweet, told her husband. The husband called up because 2 weeks earlier he paid fabrication costs to go from unallocated to allocated for 6 1,000 ounce bars, and he just asked the question, "What bars am I getting?" And he was told he was getting Chinese bars. And this was a conversation on Tuesday afternoon, and he wasn't told 3 weeks ago when he actually did the deal. So there's a whole bunch of people now who are going to call the Perth Mint and say, well, when I spoke to you 2 weeks ago, Dunnigan, there was a lot of struggle to get anything out of the Perth Mint. On some days there was nothing. On other days there was something. I should say that there has been more silver flowing out of the Perth Mint. Again, not everyone is successful, but there is a higher success rate of people actually getting some silver. There is evidence that the Perth Mint has changed its production schedule. So whereas there was a 4-month wait on 1 kilo bars, they're actually producing quite a few number of kilo bars over the last, say, a week to a week and a half. So I think the public pressure has actually resulted in the Perth Mint changing its production schedule and they're producing more silver for their investors. both for new orders as well as for their synthetic customers. But still, even though that silver is flowing, there's been a lack of communication about what is the real situation at the Perth Mint. And now they have been importing, from what I understand, quite a bit of product out of China. But what they have been typically doing is they've been melting them down and recasting them as Perth Mint bars. And obviously, by doing that, they can be assured that the bars are of 99.9% purity, and everything's above board. But with some of these other bars this week, rather than actually melting them down and recasting them, they're actually just saying, we're going to sell you a direct Chinese bar. And there's a lot of Australians who don't want that. I mean, they're doing business with the Perth Mint because they want a Perth Mint bar, because the Perth Mint is internationally recognized as in terms of being a refiner of the highest quality, in terms of their quality, their standard, and their reputation. And that has been a huge controversy, and that's obviously driven some concerns. And the other, I think, big thing is that now we're moving away from talking only about Perth. Now there are conversations about other shortages around the world. So the largest online dealer in the UK, called Bullion by Post, they appear a couple of days ago to be running short of coins. So there was a limitation as to how much could be placed on order. Then at the UK Mint, they ran out of silver bars. So you go into their website and typically it says it's in stock. So for silver bars, there was nothing in stock, whereas for coins, there was still product in stock. And obviously, there are now questions about the synthetic products of Kitco. I've heard rumors over the last few weeks about Kitco, but then I've had people who directly have contacted Kitco and have been basically told. So one person sent me a long message yesterday, and I reposted on Twitter. He was told point blank by a Kitco employee that Kitco's product is not 100% backed. So this is a conversation that's happening around the world, and I think people's eyes are being opened. We're going to sort of take this forward. I should say that I had an Australian journalist contact me yesterday who is sort of looking at this issue, and obviously, they know of the Perth Mint official position. And they wanted my point of view. So we had a lengthy chat, and I said, here's what I think is really going on. And there's consistent with the comments I've made to you, Dunnigan, on a series of interviews on your channel. So I've sent this person some new information, like only last night. But I did say, if you think this, if those who are saying there's an international syndicate and there's a conspiracy, if you think this is too far-fetched, you just have to ask the question, how did Craig Hemke write an article on the 2nd of February saying that Perth, Zurich, or Montreal is going to blow up? And it blew up. So the fact that Craig Hemke could foresee it and he called it, that should tell journalists who don't have expertise in the silver market that there is something of an international nature going on. And that's why Craig Hemke could forecast it before anyone else.
Now, you also mentioned along the way here that people who have had difficulty converting to physical or taking possession, that it's actually, the word is getting out and people are finding out, and I think that's been percolating up. You mentioned that mainstream media so far in Australia hasn't been covering this adequately. It's been the independent media. But is this garnering the attention of officialdom yet? Have you pursued trying to get official attention brought to this in the interest of the people as well?
Typically, when I've engaged with Parliament, for example, on the $10,000 cash transaction ban, I engaged with them because there was legislation before Parliament. So there is no legislation before Parliament, now, whether it's the West Australian Parliament or the federal Parliament. But I should say that there have been a number of Perth Mint customers. So in the Western Australian government, the minister who's responsible for the Perth Mint is actually the Premier. So which would be in the equivalent of the US system, it would be the governor. So the head of the Western Australian government is actually the person responsible to Parliament for the Perth Mint. Number of people have sent him letters. Not sure that there's been any response so far. I mean, to be honest, the Australian media has closed ranks. They've closed ranks with the Perth Mint, so there has been no official story that has questioned the narrative. But all I can say is there are people looking into this situation. People are having conversations in Perth. I've had a conversation with someone yesterday, and I said I can produce you documents, I can produce you Perth Mint customers who can give you their first-hand experience, which is inconsistent with the statements of the CEO of the Perth Mint, and I can produce international expert witnesses. So a number of the guests that you have on this channel, like, for example, Craig Kemke or David Morgan, if I said to them, would you be willing to talk to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation and give your expert view on the silver market and how Perth is linked into this international syndicate, I think they would take that opportunity. And so again, I've offered evidence, and like a lot of evidence of a whole host of different natures, and it's really now up to the Australian press to actually take up that challenge and say, okay, well, if you have the evidence presented, I want to review it, and we'll actually go run a story. So we'll see if anything comes of this in the next week. But so far, basically whatever the Perth Mint has wanted to push in the mainstream domain has been allowed to be published, and there has been no critical questioning of the Perth Mint.
All right. Well, in the face of that lack of coverage by the mainstream press, we and other independent media channels have been trying to participate in the truth movement here. And it is remarkable to me the number of clients who've reached out to me to try to obtain any amount, even a small amount, of physical silver bullion, for example, and saying they want to do something for the cause in the sense of bringing truth and reality, at the very least, to their financial life, and as part of a bigger picture, as a member of the human community that's out there trying to do the right thing together to bring truth to what's really going on. Any other actions you think that would be helpful for ordinary people to take to make sure that this movement isn't stifled, but that it keeps moving until we really find out what the truth is about who's really got the silver, and make sure that people take care of themselves?
Sure. One of the points I will make, Dunnigan, is that when we've talked in a previous episode about the big whale coming into the market and applying maximum pressure in terms of taking delivery of COMEX, the point, I sort of touched on this in our last interview, but the point has to be made. If someone actually wrote down how much money there is in these synthetic products around the world and added them all up, we're talking in the billions of dollars. And so when we talk about the movement, we are the whale. Those with synthetic products, if they en masse, and I should say, they are in a big way, at least in Australia, maybe a lesser extent in Europe and North America, but in a big way in Australia, the money is moving. And so, but if this was a global movement across US, Canada, UK, Europe, if we all moved our money from synthetic to physical, we're talking billions of dollars, and we're talking billions. We're talking hundreds of millions of ounces. And so while everyone's sort of thinking that there is a number of whales circulating around the COMEX for the main contract, all I can say is that if you think that you have no power and this is a hopeless situation about stopping silver market manipulation, you are the power. You have that power. So whether it's about placing a new order with any sort of physical bullion dealership to get more ounces in your physical legal ownership, or whether you have a synthetic position and you actually go convert that to allocated or to physical delivery, that is how we are going to move the ball forward. And the other thing I would say, Dunnigan, is that I just think that a lot of people around the world just don't understand how internationally integrated this whole situation is with gold and silver. And it's not just about in terms of synthetic silver and the conversation we've been having, but even the context of central bank gold, the BIS, the Bank of England. I literally had a conversation this morning with an Australian senator who's been asking questions about Australia's gold that is sitting in the Bank of England, and he cannot get a straight answer out of the Reserve Bank of Australia. He had a conversation with senior officials, and they're running out the clock, and they just continue to give promises. Yes, we'll get you this information, we'll get you that information. 2-3 months down the track, nothing happens. And that situation has been happening for a while. And having been a former bureaucrat, having worked in Parliament, I can assure you, Dunnigan, that when something has to get done, things in Australia will move and move extremely quickly. But when they don't want you to ask questions, if they don't want you to find out whether the Bank of England has all of Australia's 80 tons of gold sitting in their vaults, they will run out the clock and basically come up with all sorts of reasons for why they don't want to give out information, or they don't release audit reports, etc. And there is a lot to this about governments, central banks, bullion banks, mainstream media, military, intelligence services. There is much more to this aspect than just looking at a spot price on a Kitco chart or a gold.org chart and thinking, what is the price of gold today? There's a whole monetary system, there's a whole international framework, there's a whole series of vested interests across the world that's involved in this. People need to just take a step back and take a more conceptual understanding of, well, what's really going on here and who is doing what. And I think of people, and to be honest, it's taken me a long time. I mean, I've been looking at this situation since 2016-17, and there are people, I would say, who you think are on your side in this movement, who are basically controlled opposition. They're sort of pushing what it would appear to be a pro gold and silver message, but they're actually batting for the other side. But there are some truth tellers, and it's taken me, without naming names, it's taken me some time to get a feel for who I think are actually got their finger on the pulse, and who hasn't. I mean, one thing I will say is that before we did the recording the other day with Craig Kemke, I think Craig was talking about Eric Sprott. Eric Sprott's a multi-billionaire. He's effectively the Warren Buffett of Canadian precious metal resources in terms of the industry, in terms of the mining sector. And the question was asked, in 20 years, how many times has Eric Sprott been invited on Kitco? And the answer is 0. And that should tell you everything you need to know.
We've been speaking with John Adams, the chief economist at Good as Gold Australia and founder of adamseconomics.com, also together with Martin North, co-founders of In the Interest of the People. John, our viewers appreciate you coming on and your courage and tenacity with which you exhibit everything that you do, and that you keep fighting the good fight, bringing us the news from the trenches and tell us how we can help. Thank you for joining us here on Liberty and Finance.
Thank you very much, Donegan.
This is Donegan Kaiser, founder of Liberty and Finance. I'm now a licensed gold and silver dealer with Miles Franklin. Call me directly for the physical gold and silver that you need at the best price with personalized, private service from one of the oldest and best respected companies in the business. 30 years strong, A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, 0 complaints, licensed and bonded, insured delivery or vault storage or IRAs, excellent prices, privacy and confidentiality, pay by check, money order, ACH or wire, satisfaction guaranteed. Call me directly at 419-819-9209 or my associate at 310-562-6400 or email us at kaiser@milesfranklin.com.